Like any game system, the Sega Saturn was home to its fair share of some pretty terrible games. The list I have compiled for you here are games that I found no redeeming value at all. Games so void of any reason to play them that I easily ranked them among the worst of that generation. Sometimes the technical shortcomings were to blame, while others just had fundamentally broken gameplay and design that pretty much made it impossible to enjoy. Like any video with this subject matter, there will likely be some of you that spent enough time with some of these to find something good about them. For the rest of you, however, I recommend you stay far, far away. Let's take a look at the worst Sega Saturn games I've ever played. Our first game on the list has a special corner of hell reserved just for it. NFL 97 was the lone NFL football game published by Sega in the entire life of the Saturn. You have likely seen this mess of a game firsthand or in other YouTube videos. I'm going to spare you the rant about how slow it plays, how terrible it looks, and instead tell you how badly the closest Genesis approximation of this game just utterly shat all over this atrocity for the Saturn. NFL 98 for the Genesis was released in May 1997 as a band-aid to slowing Saturn sales in North America. Sega of America was desperate to get some money coming back in, so they tried to capitalize on the once mighty 16-bit market. They reskinned primetime NFL football from 2 years prior, updated the rosters, and released NFL 98 for the Genesis 6 months after NFL 97 dropped on the Saturn. Take a moment to soak up how much better the Genesis version is animated, how much faster the gameplay is, how much better the field moves with each play. This was on hardware released in 1988, while the Saturn was the current gen $300 machine on the market. The level of incompetence to not have an NFL game ready at the Saturn's North American launch was bad enough, but to release this travesty, this slap in the face to fans over a year into the Saturn's life, bordered on sabotage. Sega of America is often lauded as the lone voice of reason during Sega's decline. I submit this trash as Exhibit A in a long line of evidence to the contrary. Despite popular opinion, not all full-motion video games were crap. Sometimes they were able to capture a truly compelling story or atmosphere, and use that to be rather entertaining. By 1995 though, much of the genre had failed to evolve in any meaningful way, and 3D polygons quickly moved in as the new way to display cinematic gaming. This didn't stop Digital Pictures from bringing out Corpse Killer Graveyard Edition for the Sega Saturn. Sporting awful full-motion video quality that isn't much better than the Sega CD release, you get shallow, inaccurate shooting segments strung together by poorly acted cinemas telling a piss-poor story. And that's the entire game. Listen to bad acting, try and shoot zombies in truly craptacular graphics, and that's it. What gets me is the size of the sack on these jokers at Digital Pictures releasing this trash. First, it was full price at $50. Second, it didn't support the Sega Stunner Light Gun. And then they had the audacity to put one of the top 20 games of the year right on the cover. There have been some bold advertising in the long history of video games, but that right there was a pure, unadulterated lie.
Got it. You okay?
He's okay, woman. I got the tour planned for antidotes. Bullets too. Good deal.
Can't afford to lose your roster, man.
Okay, man, you got it.
Superhero and comic book games have always been hit and miss in video games. Sometimes the feel would get nailed perfectly, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. And sometimes you'd get dreck like the Incredible Hulk, the Pantheon Saga. Let's take a moment and look at what's going on here. You have the Hulk, one of the most powerful beings on the planet, strong as hell, and can leap miles at a time. But I need to stack crates to get to power-ups. So right from the get-go, the character isn't even properly represented. Next, Hulk has to flip switches in order to advance in the stages. Again, not sure these devs really understand the character at all. And finally, take a moment to look at these visuals. Indoor pop-in that is literally half the screen depth wide. Ugly, poorly animated sprites and terrible looking chunks of pseudo-transparencies are everywhere. The first step in making a superhero game is actually making you feel super. This doesn't play like a Hulk game at the most basic level, and by the time the horrific visuals have had their way with your eyes, you'll feel violated and dirty, never wanting to go near it again. I know what you're thinking. The whiz here doesn't look so bad. Kinda 16-bit-ish, but not terrible. Why is it on this list? It's here because never in my life have I seen one element completely ruin a game so badly as it does in this one. What's that, you ask? It's the damn draconian time limit that accompanies each stage that ruins the whole game. I mean, I don't even understand why it has a time limit at all. The entire game is set up with exploration in mind, yet if you deviate from the main path to beat the level even for a few seconds, you'll fail the mission and need to do it all over again. What's worse is that this is certainly aimed at younger gamers, and there is no way in hell they even have a chance with this game. Never mind the underwhelming visuals, repetitive soundtrack, and irritating isometric gameplay. Most of you will get 2 stages in and need to repeat them multiple times due to the ridiculous time constraints. Any merit is instantly lost because of this, making this already substandard experience absolutely intolerable. My god, does the Crow City of Angels suck. I have no eloquent words for why. I mean, it just sucks. The graphics suck. The sound sucks. The gameplay sucks. It should be called the Suck City of Angels. It's done sort of in a style like Resident Evil, where you wander around environments with prefixed camera angles, but how you get from angle to angle makes no sense at all. It's like the images are random instead of one cohesive area, leading to the simple navigation of a room becoming frustrating. You then must battle enemies in what has to be one of the most broken fighting engines ever devised. It has no rhyme or reason, feels stiff and unresponsive, and just isn't fun in the slightest. The Crow used to be a pretty cool property, but between the games and later movies, this franchise is in bad need of a complete reboot.
Clown face.
With the Saturn having so many fighting games, it's almost inexcusable to see a release this subpar. That didn't stop Vic Tokai from cursing the gaming world with Criticom. No meaningful combo system, stiff animations, and just awful character designs are highlights of this one. The story is even nonsensical drivel about alien races losing a relic and the combatants fighting one another for it. Again, soak in what you are seeing here. Take a look at this presentation and gameplay in action. I don't really need to disparage it with more words. It more than speaks for itself. What's amazing is that this awful collection of sounds and images sold well on the PlayStation because it was so early in that system's life. By the time it made its way to the Saturn a few years later, there were vastly superior games already on the platform, making this effort stick out like a sore thumb. If you want a fighting game that makes battle monsters look like a masterpiece, here's your game. The Saturn has an almost mythical library of shoot-'em-ups. There are so many that are so good, it's easy to believe that they all are at least worth playing. Not so, and Planet Joker here is all the evidence you need. Slow, plodding, repetitive gameplay makes up this entire experience. There's never much on screen, your mech is way too big, and the weapons you fire never seem to actually be coming from you, and many times you can't tell if you are actually scoring a hit on anything. The graphical presentation is as plain and uninspiring as you could get. There's no real detail that defines your surroundings, no wow factors in the backgrounds that usually fill the best shoot 'em ups. And you just gotta love the full screen mesh transparencies that drown out everything. The biggest sin committed here is that the entire experience is just pedestrian. You never feel like anything is really happening of consequence. You shoot tiny enemies in overly long stages, never really see or hear anything that drives you to see more. And that's the entire game. With the Saturn having so many games in this genre worth playing, this effort isn't just bad, it's offensive. Instead of just listing things I do not like, let's go over how DEFCON 5 plays out. You start the game with no idea what to do or where to go. A voice tells you control room, yet there is no obvious control room on your map. Then you will try riding an elevator called a limo to the various areas available to you, but you lack access to many of these areas despite the limo taking you there. So you sit through overly long load times in cinemas just to see a locked door. So then you finally find a door that isn't locked, but instead of finding enemies to fight and items to collect, you find nothing but vast empty rooms and long hallways that quite literally go nowhere. You'll wander these areas for far longer than you'll want, lost in the game's huge, empty, maze-like structure. You'll spend the first few hours in DEFCON 5 repeating the above before you finally find out where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And then you'll repeat the above some more. By then the realization will fully be upon you that this is not something you'll want to play ever again. When hardcore 4x4 landed on the Saturn, I was all in. An off-road truck racing game was right up my alley, and I was ready for something different from the stuff Sega was releasing. But what we got here was a game marred with technical issues. The environment textures were ugly as sin, and while the frame rate wasn't particularly good in time trial mode with just one truck, it was truly awful when you had a full grid of opponents. Since the physics engine was bouncy as hell, this poor frame rate made the game nigh on unplayable at times. It's a real shame too, because this one was actually decent on the PlayStation, where it looks and runs much better. Similar to other games like Doom, this is a case where the technical side just ruins the entire game. I've saved the absolute worst for last. Never had I played a game as bad as Death Crimson before, an awful on-rails light gun shooter. When I first put it in, I thought my gun and controller were broken. Then I thought something was wrong with my TV and system. Nope, what you have here is a good old-fashioned shitty game. Except this one goes all in to be the very best of the worst. The nonsense story and presentation is made even worse by poor hit detection and grade F graphics that make Atari Jaguar games look fantastic. Nothing makes any sense here. The images are completely random and the gameplay has almost nothing to do with anything you're told in the story. The only way I can stomach this atrocity for any length of time is to play it invincible so I am not at the mercy of the truly terrible gameplay. Over the years, this has become almost mythical in its awfulness, and many of you might think it's just hype playing it up. While I initially recommended that these games be avoided, I actually advise that each and every one of you experience this one at least once. You'll have a newfound appreciation of what a bad game really is, and will not throw around the term so loosely afterwards. Bad games make their way to every platform, even our favorites. Sometimes serious flaws can be overlooked in a game, and some fun can be found. I was never able to do that with this lot, instead realizing that there are far better games out there worth my time. As I get older, that time has become precious, and I have become even more protective of it. I owe nothing to a game to try and find enjoyment in it. If I play it for 5 minutes and want to stop, that's good enough. It's the game's responsibility to hook me when I play it, not mine to find the good in it. I can't fault any of you for thinking the same, no matter what the game is. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.